In August 2023, the Cambodian government signed generational change, with 20 of the 28 ministries appointing new leaders. In December of that year, Focus Cambodia met with then recently appointed Minister of Mines and Energy, Keo Rottanak. Rottanak brings more than a decade of experience in the sector to the influential position. We sat down with him at his office in Phnom Penh to discuss his path to the ministry, Cambodia's big bets on renewable energy, and the government's ambitious goal of reaching net zero emissions by 2050.
With your background at the EDC, what are your key priorities as the minister?
Having spent more than 15 years at EDC at the operational level, and I assume that you're talking about the energy sector first.
Correct.
Coming here, to me, gives me an added advantage with the understanding of the operational opportunity and challenges, because I once worked there as a managing director. So I come to the ministry to take over the policy job. That experience allows me to marry both operational challenges and opportunity, as well as to look at policy with a complete picture. So normally you would have a little bit of disconnect, where politicians at the political level and policy level would not have the experience from the field, and therefore sometimes policy can tend to be formulated within an atmosphere that there's a little bit of a gap. So in this case, I believe that the energy sector stands to gain from my experience being at the operation before, and now at the policy formulation. I think this informs my policy making going forward. So that's the way I see it.
And what would you say are kind of the key priorities for yourself in this new role?
It's basically to leverage and to bring our development to the next level. When I joined EDC more than 15 years ago, the household connection to the grid was at 14%. Today, almost 90% of households connected to the national grid. And connection to the national grid means that they have 24 hours electricity, that more than 50% of the power they're using comes from renewable resources, compared to the more than 90% heavy fuel, oil, and diesel back in 15 years ago. And services are better, as well as the tariff have been brought down significantly. 15 plus years ago when I joined EDC, it was anywhere between almost $0.50 to $1.50 in many parts of Cambodia in terms of 1 kilowatt hour of electricity price. Today, the poorest of the poor consume power from the grid at less than 10 cents. So there's a huge difference. Industry used to have access to less than 24 hours a day, and the prices range was from something like 25 cents to more than $1. So we have made huge progress since then. So going forward is about how to solidify this progress. So at the end of 2022, we had 62% of renewables energy coming to the energy mix. But we cannot be complacent. We have to do better going forward. In the fight against climate change, Cambodia is putting ourselves at the forefront with the rest of the international community to make sure that the energy policy going forward will be cleaner, will continue to be affordable, reliability will be better, and the issue equity and inclusiveness will be there. So if you look at the energy policy principle going forward, will be under 4 key pillars. A is clean energy, C. Affordability will be there, is A. Reliability will be further enhanced, that is R. And equity will be there. Inclusiveness will be there, it will be E, so care. And the way we see our commitment to net zero by 2050, which is very bold, by the way. Some big country would put 2060, 2070 as their net zero commitment. But we have put 2050 as a commitment. So in that, we want to make sure that an energy transition will be a process of empowerment, that we bring people, especially women and vulnerable groups, together and create more job and opportunity for them. So this is actually a democratic process to correct some of the things that we have not done well in the past. So to me and to our government, to our Prime Minister, this is an opportunity. It's not a burden. It's an opportunity to basically do better socially, energy-wise, and also for the climate change as well.
Cambodia has come a long way. In the 1990s, the grid, the network, everything was laid bare and destroyed. During Reconstruction, what were the priorities for rebuilding?
It began with, I began my career at EDC as a managing director in April 2008. The appointment came 27 March 2008, but I assumed office on the first day of April 2008. I spent the first 1 year, literally, to try to understand the institution and the political economy governing the institution, because I believe that any institutional organization does not exist in a vacuum. It is part and parcel of a society, and therefore it was proper, in my view at that time, to try to understand the path dependency of EDC, the opportunity and the constraint that it had up to that point, and understanding the key stakeholders and government policies, why they were as such. At the same time, was trying to understand the people who would be important in the process of delivering things, which is basically the inward-looking process to see where the staff were at, what would be the incentive and disincentive at the same time. So the first 1 year was about analyzing that kind of path dependency, the political economy evolving around EDC. And I believe that after 1 year, I had that insight. So that's why after 1 year, I put forward a path. So to me, for any leader, it's not enough to try to just understand path dependency, but you also have to be able to create a new path, which is path creation. So the barriers to EDC at that point, the barriers were multiple. Institutional, policy, societal constraint, human resource constraint, as well as financial constraint. We addressed them all after 1 year by trying to build a coalition of change, I would call it, from a policy level to the operational level. So basically, I was talking to staff, trying to incentivize them correctly, because I believe that staff respond, at least the majority of people respond to good things. With that belief and the measure we put in place, we were able to create a sense of hope and aspiration for the future. And that's how we began. Staff were motivated. Of course, there were a few who did not participate and had to be disciplined, but the majority were convinced that we had a better path to go forward together. And we start delivering, and they start seeing results. And these results were also beneficial to the staff themselves. And for the politician also, they're willing to believe and let me try new things, especially the Prime Minister, Samdech Techo Hun Sen, who appointed me knowing that I did not have any experience and training in energy at all before that. But he was willing to try to bring someone new. He was willing to think outside the box, if I would, if you allow me to put it that way. And allowed me to try, and even gave me the opportunity to jump the queue. I could write to him directly without having to consult the minister if necessary. So you see the urgency, the sense of urgency from the top leadership, and the political commitment they were willing to give me, and the patience they were willing to give me. And with all this combination from the top and the commitment from the staff, a new-found cause together, I believe we made it. And of course, we reached out to the international community, to China, to Japan, to ADB, KfW Germany, AFD France, and others, including civil societies and government institutions. So we worked in a better coalition. And I think the fact that we have arrived at the success we have had the last few years signify that coalition work and leverage our domestic resources with those of the regional corporations. And I think we are in a new position that we feel it's good to go further and create bigger impacts for Cambodia and the world, and the region, of course.
With the growth and development of the sector in the past decades, sufficient energy supply has been achieved, and broadly there's more energy available. How does that impact the price for the consumers?
The Cambodian people have the right to expect that their government, organizations, perform better over time for them, be it service delivery, supply of energy, reliability of energy, and also the prices. So that has been, in fact, we don't see that as a pressure on us. We see it as something that should come from within. And that's the reason why, since I took office back at EDC in 2008 until a few months back when I left the office and came to the ministry, we have always taken issue of affordability to our hearts. For the past 15 years, I was the one who came to the Prime Minister to propose for tariff reductions, even before he ever asked us to do anything. So as the case in point, since the assumption of office by the new administration, being led by Dr. Hun Manet, 3 times we went to him, which fits into his overall plan for Cambodia. But the initiative always came from us as well. We went to the Prime Minister and said, look, we have the capacity, even during this difficult time, when nations around the world raising electricity tariff because the war in Ukraine, because of COVID, we have the new opportunity to actually reduce tariff for industry, for agro-industry, for even tourism. The last announcement a few weeks back over the reduction for tourism industry, because we also want to bring tourists back. And energy has a role to play, so we actually proposed to the Prime Minister, who on the same day approved recommendation. So you see the next 3 months, guest houses, hotels, shopping malls, restaurants that are serving the tourism industry will have a discount. So it's an example that we would like to go forward with cleaner energy supply, with better reliability, with better services, but also the tariff is important. During the COVID lockdown and the subsequent impact, negative impact from the war in Ukraine, the tariffs in Cambodia remains the same. And it was not easy because we, EDC, the state-owned company, had to lose some money because of that tariff maintenance at that level, pre-COVID-19 level. But we prioritize our people first because during difficult time, it's nothing more important than to go back to your core value of making sure that your people are protected. Yet you lose some money, but it doesn't matter because the livelihood of the millions out there are more important. So we would have time to recover, and that has worked. Now, if you look at financial situation of EDC, because of our policy, they help the people during lockdown, they help the industry during the Ukraine war, the Russian war against Ukraine. But at the same time, EDC has started to improve for the last 6 months. So yes, we took a big financial hit during the COVID and Ukraine war because we prioritize our people first, our industry first. But at the same time, the policy has generated the political social support for EDC for our government policy. And because of that political capital, we are able to do a few things more. And of course, our hydropower, our solar power have allowed us to do better financially. So we look back to the policy of the last 3 years, and we feel reinforced that what we did was right, that the people first policy is the correct thing to do, and better improvement because renewable energy and other things allow us to do better. So I think we're good at this stage.
Speaking of the Prime Minister, Hun Manet has hinted at providing discounts for manufacturers and factories. Do you think that's a promising strategy?
We have done it. He has done it. In fact, he has done more than the CPP election pledges, because if you look at the pledge, was to maintain the electricity tariff. Actually, we already started discount program. We even adopted a new policy to eliminate capacity charge soon for the rooftop deployment. We used to charge capacity charge for industry and household, and soon we are going to remove that capacity charge so that people can also start to scale up their rooftop solar, for example. So these are some of the implementation that the Prime Minister has made possible during his less than 90 days in office. And we are happy because we were part of it. So we are happy going forward. The issue of tariff for the industry and the society will continue to be important for us. Again, we are going back to the 4 pillars of energy policy, the care, clean energy, affordability, and this is the second pillar. We like to go cleaner, but we would not like to sacrifice the competitiveness in terms of prices from energy for industry, for society, and others. So we will continue to take care of that. Ideally, over time, we will also see the share of renewable going up. Our commitment is to be better than many countries around the world because we set a very high standard for us. At least 70% renewables by 2030. If you look at the ASEAN benchmark, 30% of renewable by 2025. But we 35% by 2025. But we want to go above that, and we have already done it. But going cleaner is not enough. We have to make sure that the tariffs coming from energy, clean energy, will be affordable. So over time, we hope that it will come down even further to help industry compete, to provide better relief for our people out there, the million out there.
Renewable energy is also a key driver of foreign investment. What do you see as the biggest challenges to expanding renewable energy, and what's the broader future of renewable energy in Cambodia?
Cambodia is not unique when it comes to that kind of challenge. You look at the rest of the world, the challenges are mostly the same. To be able to scale renewable energy up, especially when you talk about variable renewable resources like solar and wind, it requires a lot more upgrade to the grid. Not only a lot more investment that will be required to make sure that the grid will have more capacity to be able to transmit renewable energy from far distances, even across borders, like from Laos, from Vietnam, and Thailand, for example, and from us back to Singapore if we want to export also. It requires that we will have to invest a lot more to enhance our transmission capacity. So that a lot more $1 billion is going to be invested. And to mobilize $1 billion, it takes time. And this is one of the constraints. So financial resources. But it's also to do with the complementary and supporting technologies. Intermittent renewable energy requires some storage capacity because you don't have the sunlight 24 hours a day or the wind 24 hours a day. And therefore, each nation will have to look at investment in storage technology, be it pumped storage hydro or lithium-ion batteries. And this is more expensive. This is new. Pumped storage hydro require favorable geography. And you cannot pick everywhere. Lucky, Cambodia probably just found one, 1,000 megawatt that our Prime Minister announced last 30th of November, last month. But we also going to be using both, some battery storage and also some pumped hydropower to be able for us to leverage the intermittency, to regulate the intermittency of wind in the future and solar currently. And therefore, we believe that it is an opportunity, but also it's a challenge because we have to have the resources, financial, and to discover more pumped storage hydro site to be able to do that. And at the same time, waiting for battery storage to come, the cost to come down a little bit more. The chip war, you can see, it doesn't help. And we, as a small country, can only hope and we're making the appeal to the rest of the international community, that nations should collaborate and work together. There should not be any competition among nations to divide rare earth material or supply chain. They can only, in our view, there should always be partnership instead of competition, because we have only one planet, and to fight climate change, it requires the world to come together, because climate change and solution to climate change transcends sovereignties, individual efforts, and we can only hope that if big nations can work together better, and we can share resources, be it chips or critical rare earth material, and the issue of battery storage prices will come down, and therefore we can scale up this faster. So these are some of the things that I see as challenges. Yes, there will be an issue with human resource constraint, but I think Cambodians, if you look back from my early experience since the war, especially after we had peace since 1998, because the Prime Minister worked very hard to reconcile our nation, Cambodians have a good tendency to learn very quickly. Our young people are good at learning, and they want to learn. They want to embrace change. So I wouldn't be too concerned about adaptability in terms of the human resources, knowing that our young people are willing to learn new things. But I'm more concerned about the external environment, about the cost of financing that keeps rising, about the geopolitical tension that could spill over to the cost of critical material that will be used for battery storage, for wind turbines, and for solar panels. Mm-hmm. So again, Cambodia will continue to make the appeal to those who own technology and the finances. Please work together, because in the interest of our climate and our one planet, we should be doing together. When we began our dialogue with Singapore, just to go back a little bit, we have a concept in ASEAN called the APG, the ASEAN Power Grid. That has been around and on the table for the last 30 plus years. But ASEAN has failed to move it to real implementation. So what has happened in the past is that countries in ASEAN chose to go bilaterally. So like Vietnam, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, or Laos, Cambodia, and Cambodia, Thailand, like that. So to go more than 3 or 4 has been a challenge. So when we began our dialogue with Singapore, we, especially Minister Tan Sri Leng, my counterpart in Singapore, we wanted to try and resuscitate this. And when we started the conversation, there was some reluctance in some part of the ASEAN members. But the good thing is that after a year, we have seen that nations are willing to cooperate. Countries like Indonesia is very much in, Vietnam is very much into the concept, Laos also, and lately Malaysia. I hosted a meeting with the President and CEO of TNB, the Malaysian National Utility, who came here and invited me to go back to Kuala Lumpur to talk to them and the minister, which I agreed to do that soon. So I'm now encouraged more than ever that there is a strong possibility that Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Singapore, and perhaps even Thailand are willing to start phase 1 of the APG. And then we can roll out to the rest of the ASEAN, which will have some more geographical constraints like Philippines, islands, I understand that there will be further constraints. But at least 6, 7 countries can put themselves together and can start sharing renewable resources. Singapore is small. 95% of electricity generation comes from gas, and we understand why it is like that. But it should not be the way forward. Singapore can also tap into the renewable resources in Indonesia and Malaysia, Laos, and Vietnam, Cambodia. And Cambodia is going to be a dependable and strong partner for Singapore and others also. So I think soon we are going to set up a technical task force that will consist of national utilities or equivalents for us And this task force will be backed up by all the respective Minister of Energy and our leaders. So I believe that we have a good chance that in 4 or 5 years we will see electrons start to flow across nations, which is going to be more than just 2 or 3. This time it will be more than that. And Cambodia is excited at the opportunity. A, we could share abundant renewable resources, but also B, to also create new jobs, green jobs for young people, and to create some additional revenues from this green investment so that we can do and speed up our nation building efforts.
You spoke a bit about the recently announced 1,000 megawatt hydropower.
Pump storage hydropower.
Can you speak a little more about that?
This is an important discovery. To us, it's going to be momentous because the world would either use battery storage to regulate the intermittency of variable renewable resources through battery storage, like lithium-ion battery storage, which is expensive. It's good, but it's expensive. And it's not renewable, because when you go and extract cobalt and silicon and lead and other critical material, they are not renewable. So that is a constraint. But if we can have pump storage, this is a lot cheaper and it's renewable because we can have the water, and again, we can use it to regulate the intermittency. This discovery is good for that. It's cheaper and it's renewable. But on top of that, it will allow Cambodia to scale up our wind and solar at least by 2,000 megawatt more. Imagine that. Imagine Cambodia can go and say, yes, no more domestic coal plants. We're not going to sign any new coal plant agreements, because we know that our cleaner renewable energy can give that back up. So going forward, you will see that we would like to see, at this stage, domestic hydropower represent about 43% in the generation mix. Going forward, we would like that to be replaced by solar. So hydro, if you look at the importance, so hydropower should take a back seat. And solar energy will, over time, take the front seat. Because solar energy is easy to scale up, easy to deploy, and also it has less adverse impact to the environment. On top of that, it is better in terms of the mitigation against droughts and global warming. But again, the best national grid in terms of renewable energy, in terms of affordability, in terms of equity, in terms of reliability, the best one is not a grid that depends on one source. The most resilient grid in the world is a grid that is the best combination, optimal combination of different variable technologies. A single source of energy would not make it, because it always has flaws and strength. Each technology counts with flaw and strength. The best optimization is the one that can combine different resources nicely. In our view, in our policy, going forward, the best combination would be solar predominantly, backed up by pump storage, hydro, and lithium-ion battery storage, and then some conventional hydro and wind energy. But these three are not enough. You will have to leverage a little bit interconnection from the neighboring countries, because we do not have to develop everything ourselves. By sharing the reserve margin that each country has or maintains at this stage, collectively we can afford a situation where we do not have to put a lot more generation, which is basically, in a sense, meaning that if we don't have to put new power plants, it's better than putting a new power plant. Because if you put a new power plant in, there's bound to be some impact to the environment, to society. So we would like to see saving from new investment in generation is possible because we can do interconnection, we can do more sharing. So we can reduce our energy projects, the carbon footprint, so to speak. At the same time, we introduced additional measure, which is energy efficiency program. We like to say that this is the invisible fuel. You don't have to encroach to the environment if you can conserve energy. Go on with your lives. We don't ask people to stop using electricity, but we are going to make an aggressive campaign. We're going to launch an aggressive campaign to appeal to the public to use energy more responsibly. So if you look at an energy policy going forward, in 7 years, less than 7 years, we want to save $2 billion of investment from having to put into new generation. So if we save 19% by 2030 in terms of demand reduction, that means that Cambodia would not have to put new power plants worth about about $2 billion. That's a huge saving to the environment, to our society at large. And this can be done through energy efficiency and through interconnections.
With hydropower, there's obviously potential, but there's also issues that cut back on the promise of it. There's environmental issues, social issues. How does the ministry measure the social environmental costs versus the potential profits and promise of hydropower? Do they do social assessments, environmental assessments? Are those made available to the public?
Right. Cambodia is not unique to the rest of the world. We actually employ the same tools that are used by most nations. We go to the same school. I went to U.S. University in Japan. I never had my training in the East, by the way. Nothing wrong with the East, but I'm just saying that the world apply the same tools when it comes to theories and practices. We have done the same. In hydro, for example, we have a very lengthy process. If you see the hydro that already in commissioning, on average, it takes about 8 to 10 years to develop. The first few years will be intensive study, consultation, interministerial consultation. We go to the communities. We bring the community to Phnom Penh. Even sometimes we bus people to see projects in other countries, like we bring certain community leaders to see projects in some other places before they actually have project developed in their community. I'm quite proud of the process we have adopted. And any project before development, it has to be cleared by our Ministry of Environment. So community consultation will be there. Cross-cutting issue with institution will be consulted before we adopt. So we employ economic financial analysis tools, but sometimes we also go one step further, which is to look at project beyond monetary values. You know, we know very well shadow costs, environmental costs. That's there, that's standard. But value judgment, which is usually not taught in school, but we take it seriously. For example, when I proposed to the previous Prime Minister and was fully embraced by the previous Prime Minister and the current Prime Minister, Dr. Hun Manet, that Cambodia, without having to look at modeling, it will definitely say no to any hydro on the Mekong mainstream. That is not environmental, social, and it's basically a matter of values. We have not, and we are not going to entertain any studies submitted to us for project on the Mekong mainstream or hydro near the Tonle Sap. It is simply a no-go because it's a matter of value judgment. It's a matter of us going forward. We just don't want that, period. Yes, any development, be it nuclear, solar, wind, you will have some impact to society, to the environment. But you have to pick, we have to pick a project that has the most minimal adverse impacts and compared to the overwhelming benefit to society. If you look at nuclear technology, it's a problem with wastes. It's not renewable. Even solar, it has problems. If you deploy solar panels, in essence, you rob that land of the opportunity to be used for agriculture. Or if you have solar, sometimes they glare to the neighbors around. Wind, you may have noise that the community may not like. But we know that solar is better than coal, and solar better than hydro. And if you compare hydro and coal, we know that hydro is better than coal. And you can also save Cambodia from having to spend foreign exchange overseas because you have hydro domestically. There's bound to be some impact. But we know that given the choices, we know that our selection would provide fewer adverse impact than the ones we have not selected. So that we are sure. And we also very certain that we have exhausted the process of selection responsibly. Because what we do, we carry our current Cambodian generation on our shoulders and also our responsibility and accountability towards the future generation. And this is an issue that I hold near and dear to my heart. This is actually at the center of what we do here, or what I do, because I would not approve. For example, we have received a project that they want to put some wind turbine offshore. At this stage, I would say no, because Cambodia has a small access to the international community through the sea. We would like our sea to be used for navigation, for open trade, for tourism, and for our fishermen. You wouldn't like to go to our sea and see chopstick being put around. So at this stage, we will exhaust other options. Let's look at solar. Let's look at wind turbine in other parts. So as policymaker, I can assure the Cambodian people that whatever we do, we put the interest of the Cambodian generation at this level, at this stage, above our head. And we also take into account the future generation, knowing what we do today will have implications for them later. Even the way we take soft loans, we take the soft loan responsibly. I was the managing director at ADC, as you know. There were donors who came to us and say, and banks, take some more loans. Your credit rating is good. We are willing to give you more loans. I would say no. We'll have to do our calculation first, because the loans we take, the grant we take, we know we have to pay back. We know we owe somebody something for this generation and future one. And we want to make it so prudent. So if you look at the EDC credit rating, it's still strong because we have done that responsibly. We don't want the future generation to pay a heavy price financially or even environmentally. So I think we are really prudent in that. And our Prime Minister is very prudent. That's why the new Prime Minister, Dr. Hun Manet, said, keep going. And he sent our Minister of Environment to represent Cambodia at the COP28 in Dubai, UAE. He is still there. And his message, the Prime Minister's message, is clear. No go on the Mekong mainstream. That's a clear red line. No go to new coal projects. Yes, a resounding yes to the maximization of the scale up of renewable resources like wind, solar especially, and of course some hydro. And we're going to be working with the regional partner and the global partner to commit Cambodia to the net zero by 2050. So his message is, and his commitment is steadfast and unwavering. So I'm happy to have a leader like that.
The new pentagonal strategy also prioritizes the development of the extractive industry, including developing a national petroleum industry. What are the goals of this, and what does developing a national petroleum strategy in Cambodia look like? Does this involve the Apsara field? Will there be potentially deals with Thailand for extraction? What's the future of oil in Cambodia?
Our government see oil and gas as an interim strategy. If we can have oil and gas, it will help our current economic needs. It will help with our transition to net zero by 2050. You know, like I said, humanity does not have the luxury of living in the ideal world. In the ideal world, you would not touch the environment at all. You would stay at home, you don't cut any trees, you don't touch a river, you don't even fish. Anytime you go to the environment and do something, of course you encroach onto the environment and habitat. But we are not in the ideal world. Today, in all the best case studies and scenario for the world to go to net zero by 2050 in general, you would need the role of oil and gas in the interim. Look at Singapore. They say that their energy going forward is gas predominantly, gas. They have no choice. And we understand why. We understand why the United States will use some coal, why Australia uses coal for its energy generation, but also for export. Australia is one of the biggest exporters of coal, Indonesia also. But Australia is also doing a lot to fight climate change, responsibly, to be fair to them. So what I'm saying is that we see the role of oil and gas in the interim. Cambodia is still a developing nation by status. We need a lot more financial resources to build a nation, to build our infrastructure, and to develop our human resources. It all needs money. And we cannot go to loan, be it soft loan or even commercial loan. That is not a way to go all the time. There will be a role for soft loan, but you cannot depend on soft loan and commercial loan all the time. So that is where the extractive industry, be it mining or oil and gas, can come in. It will fulfill the initial period in the transition so that we can have resources to build all the infrastructure, including human resources, for us to go to the next level. But we must also see that this is not the sustainable solution. Every time to extract oil and gas, it will actually have the counter effect in terms of your commitment to climate change and a lot more. So that's why when we look at oil and gas extraction, we look at it as an interim measure to fulfill our current needs and our transition. But we are not going to depend, our future should not depend on this extractive industry because it's not going to be sustainable. And that's the reason why if you look at my town hall meeting with youth, while we appreciate that mining has a role to play in creating employment and revenue creation, same to oil and gas, Cambodia's future will depend a lot more on their brain and their attitude towards work. My message to our Cambodian youth has been consistent for the last 20 years, is that Cambodia is proud that we have some resources, and we'll make use of some of them. Not all of them, some of them, responsibly, in a way that show our responsibility towards our communities, to people, future generation, but also to our environment. But we should depend a lot more on ourselves, which is our brain and our hard work attitude. Look at Singapore. It's a very good example. Look at Japan also. They don't have a lot of resources, but they can build a nation and can be as rich as Singapore, and in Singapore going stronger, by just working hard and keep learning new things. And this is the way I would like to lead the ministry, that going forward, the mining sector, the petroleum, oil and gas will chip in for our transition. It will provide some help along the way, but it should not be the path of long-term dependency. It should be the long-term sustainability of our future would depend on the ability to learn new things, to leverage technology, and to be able to adopt a responsible and work attitudes towards society and towards growing the economy. So this is the way I would like to say. If you look at electricity generation today, electricity coming from coal generation represents about 33% in the capacity mix. If you compare that to the global average, according to the IEA, Cambodia is very much along the same line. Global average today, coal still represents about 33-35%. So we are very much at that level. Although we do a lot better when it comes to solar, hydro, and other renewables. The future will be a lesser role for coal. If you look at our energy policy going to 2030 and beyond 2040, coal will further shrink in terms of its share in the generation mix. And it has to be this way. So when our Prime Minister announced the cancellation of the 700 coal project in Batum Sako Kokong, that to shows the world that we mean what we say, that he means what he said. Because the COP28 meeting, first day, almost happened at the same time. And our Prime Minister, Dr. Hun Manet, announced the cancellation of the coal project in Kokong, Cambodia. It was a message that we sent to Dubai that Cambodia is going to be on track to our net zero commitment by 2050. And we are not saying that. We have taken decisive action on the ground. The fact that today we have more than 50% renewables in our energy mix, we feel good. But we're not going to take things at that complacent level. We are going to work harder with the rest of the international community, with their support and partners. We are going to go further. So when we say at least 70% renewable by 2030, with solar playing a more predominant role, we are going to stay focused on that. And we believe that we have a very high degree of probability that we can achieve that. Because it's just like in the past when people looked at Cambodia trying to have peace, they said, oh, it may not be possible. But the Prime Minister, previous Prime Minister Samdech Hun Sen, brought peace and stability to Cambodia in 1998. That opened the way for our development today. And he started building hydro and a few things there without having the word renewable that much, without having the word climate change at that time. But he did it because we saw many years ago that our path going forward will be cleaner. It has to be energy footprint will have to be cleaner and more affordable energy and more equitable energy supply. So I think we've been doing that.
The pentagonal strategy also touches on nuclear power. Mm-hmm. What's the potential for that, and what kind of international or regional cooperation could be involved in that development?
If you look at all the studies and the forecasts by everyone, including the IEA, the International Energy Agency, or IRENA, the world would look something like this. If all wind, solar, and hydro are exhausted, the world would probably have about 70% or 70+% max. And that would not be sufficient to have the net zero by 2050. It will require energy efficiency program. It will require that the human race cut back on energy consumption, or at least use it more responsibly. And rectifying a lot of other things, EV, industrial processes, agriculture, for example, has to be electrified more. And even that is not sufficient. The world will need complementary technology because there will be intermittency from renewable resources. And therefore, the role of nuclear energy, for example, is still foreseen. They may have a role. But then the world have to address it from the safety issue and from the non-renewableness of that resource. Cambodia look at nuclear technology is not so much to try to see a situation where we deploy it anytime soon. When we put nuclear energy into our policy, it's basically to try to understand this technology a little bit more and what role it could play in the future. But at this stage and in the near future, that understanding gives us practical measure on the ground. Something like we have to help the international community applying this technology and knowledge and understanding for equipment that has radioactive material and how to use it well, responsibly, and safely, and in terms of the safety. So if Cambodia imports scanner, MRI equipment, these are radioactive material components in it. So the Ministry of Health, hospitals need how to use them responsibly if it comes to a time when they have to dispose of this equipment. So we've been working with the International Atomic Agency, for example, to make sure, and with the UN agency, UNDP and others, to make sure we understand how to treat this equipment well. So from that perspective, a lot more than any time soon that we're going to use a nuclear power plant. Although Cambodia reserves the right, we reserve the right to use it if down the road we need one, and if technology is affordable enough and safe enough, we open. But at this stage, I can assure you that I don't see in the next 10 years or so that we are going to use nuclear power plants technology anytime soon. So rest assured we're not.
You discussed the electrification of different industries. Transportation, there's a lot of promise there. What would that look like for transportation as well as the electrification of agriculture or manufacturing? What does that look like?
It looks something like this, that we would like to see, for example, at least 60-70% of motorcycles switch from gasoline-based to EV. A, it's environmentally cleaner. B, it's a lot cheaper over the life of this vehicle use. And the fact that they stop using it and take the power, the electron from the more than 60-70% renewable energy from a generation of electricity, that would be a good thing. And it is going to be part and parcel of our net zero strategy going to the 2050. But we have to be realistic. We cannot look at heavy buses or like container trucks. Not yet in our reach. But if we can see at 40% of our car, light vehicle, family vehicle, switched from gasoline or diesel going to EV, that would be a good thing by 2030. Because we see 2030 as our first stop before we reach the second big stop in 2050. So that's something like that. But it's not enough. We also have to be able to extend our clean energy to the industrial processes. So yesterday I met a company that is exploring iron ore, and to try to, hopefully down the road, they can set up a steel plant in Cambodia. And the first question I asked them, are you going to set up a coal power plant in your project? If this is going to be the case, I will probably say no. And he said, no. We're going to probably need about 30 to 50 megawatt from the grid. And I said, that's good, because that is going to fit into our strategy, because we want to electrify. You know, we look at steel making business around the world, it's pretty dirty. Cambodia would not want that. So as a newcomer, at least we have the advantage of knowing what others have done before us. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel, especially when that wheel is dirty. So in this case, if they are going to use the 30 or 50 megawatt in the next few years in their steel plant from the national grid power, and that grid is going to give them 70% renewable energy, that is good. That's what I mean by electrifying the industrial processes. Agriculture. We have been rolling cheap electricity, in fact subsidized electricity for agricultural, agro-processing and irrigation. So where we can extend our grid, where they utilize our grid, they can stop from run their own diesel generator to pump water for their rice field. They can use cheap electricity and clean electricity to pump the water. And we have seen that across the country. We don't have the scale that we want, but I think it has already started in a big way. And the reason why the people are not using it and more to the grid power to pump to irrigate their field is because we still have to mobilize additional money to make sure that we can extend the grid to the rice field further afield. And this is very expensive, and we need some time to mobilize that kind of resources. And all subsidized, by the way, because if you raise the tariff, it's just not going to work. And of course, we also need the collaboration from the user, because they're so used to using that pump. So it needs some time for them to switch. So the first thing you have to give them is the time so that they can adjust their mindset. But we see that future as well. So that's what I mean by electrifying agriculture. So stop running their genset to do this irrigation. Switch to the grid power. And some of them have done it. And more is going to be doing that. So that's what I mean by electrifying agriculture, the light transport sector, as well as the industrial processes.
For the light transport sector, as far as family vehicles and motorbikes, the main mode of transportation, would tax incentives and other legislation be possible paths to incentivizing that?
I'm not going to say it's going to be possible. I think it's going to be imperative. The way this is going to work, it has to be an integrated, multi-pronged approach to the solution. It has to be sustainable also. Fiscal incentive will have to be there. Regulatory requirement and compliance will have to be there to induce behavioral change. But it's also about understanding, give them some time. So it will be the work that will be, the way I see it, energy will be big in terms of rolling out a type of infrastructure that make it convenient for people. And the electricity from the cleaner source that make them proud if they participate. And the type of electricity tariff that has to be there, that must be affordable. So it will further incentivize them to change their behavior or to switch from the conventional internal combustion cars to EV. That's coming from energy sector. So rolling infrastructure charging point that will be everywhere, hopefully, and affordable in terms of tariff, and the safety that we can provide so that people are comfortable. That is the role of energy sector. But the transport ministry will have to come in terms of building the type of rail network and even port network that they have to plan ahead and let us invest directly and in partnership with the private sector. Because when we see development, we don't see the role of the government alone, from my experience also. We see a stronger partnership between the government, the private sector, civil society, and private citizens together. No government can do all the job by itself. The way we are going to address climate change, we're going to address energy policy, and EV policy is going to be the same thing. A strong partnership between the government, civil society, private sectors, and civil citizens, private citizens. The Ministry of Economy and Finance will have to come in along with the Customs Department from the duty and fiscal incentives. So I think with all working together, we can achieve that objective. And in fact, the Prime Minister understands it very clearly. And that is the reason why he has asked the Deputy Prime Minister of Economy and Finance to take the lead in overall policy coordination and formulation, because the Prime Minister understands that a few ministries will have to work together along with the private sectors and other stakeholders to make sure that the EV policy will come out with the type of pragmatism and sustainable chances that this can be implemented. I feel good with that.
Commitment not to build any more dams on the Mekong,
Mainstream.
the mainstream Mekong, as well as some studies that have posited that the potential for wind power is limited, and some of it potentially could be in protected areas and without wanting to push into offshore wind farms. What's the potential for new hydro projects, the 1,000 megawatt project, as well as wind power? Where will that be?
I think the issue of hydro is almost certain, because after study, in terms of financial, economic, societal, environmental impact we have done, it's a good candidate for going forward. It's going to be our cheaper 1,000 megawatt. It will open the way for the scale up of wind and solar, at least by 2,000 megawatt more. Solar is not a problem, but we will have to study more carefully in terms of wind resources, because, like you said, there will be environmental issue that will have to be taken more seriously. But again, Cambodia look at this as not just everything within our border. That's one of the reasons why we've been a strong advocates, one of the strong regional advocates for interconnectivity. We've been working with Laos, for example, knowing that Laos has even strong wind potential, stronger, bigger wind potential. So we're going to address the wind energy from both, and same thing for hydro, the domestic endowment, but also from the benefits that we can get from interconnection. So we believe that with this in mind, we can do. It's just like in the UK, you don't do everything. In the UK, the UK partners with the North Sea, for example, by having this longest HVDC line in the world that allows the transmission of energy from the North Sea to the UK, for example. So Cambodia looking at something similar. We are not addressing any energy resource or technology just from the perspective of our extreme nationalistic lens. We look at regional cooperation. We're looking at inclusiveness, not only for the project, but also about a broader political and social agenda. The way we see energy interconnectivity, more than just the supply of clean energy itself, more than just the commitment to the environment itself, but it's about also opening ways that allows Cambodians, Singaporean, Indonesian, Malaysian, Vietnamese, Laos, Thais to come closer together. Because at the end of the day, we have a bigger agenda. Each of us is not about our own needs. It's about the protection of our planet as well. And the only way to do that is to generate a strong political will to cooperate. And energy can be one avenue to bring about broader understanding and coalition for our climate and for our planet. That's the way we see it.